So today we're going to talk about religion. So, Mom, know that we're not talking about or going to be going into why religion is good or bad. We're specifically going to be talking about the role of religion in public and legal life and how it should sit kind of in that conversation, but not control that conversation. And we're going to do it through the lens of a particular organization. That organization is called the Satanic Temple. And it sounds very sinister, but know that as we discuss this, it really has very little to do with actual, as defined by kind of Christians and Catholics, Satan or the devil. It's used as an idea and a placeholder. And so today, we are going to talk about Satan. Too much? Probably too much, huh? All right. So yeah, let's talk about Satan. Okay, so I want to frame up this conversation because this is a delicate subject. The thing we're really going to be focused on and talking about here is the split between legality and morality and how they can influence each other, but they are not the same and they are not interchangeable. And while morality can advise legality, it is a poor substitute for jurisprudence and the structure of the law. So, that said, let's dive into where it came from and why the Satanic Temple even exists. Well, one of the things that happens a lot, and this is why I'm being very clear at the beginning, that we are not talking about Satan, the actual Prince of Darkness, opposition, end of the world kind of dude. We're talking about the concept of Satan as it exists in the national zeitgeist as a kind of king of evil space, right? So the Church of Satan is a different thing, and they're often confused with the Satanic Temple. The Church of Satan actually deals with Satan, right? And so that's 1960s, a guy called Anton LaVey. He founded it. He did weird occult stuff. Super strange, a lot of drugs, a lot of things that kind of were right in the counterculture zeitgeist then. So the Satanic Temple was founded in response to George W. Bush's Office of Faith-Based and Community Initiatives. So it was this group whose goal through the government was to deliver government funds to religious organizations that were acting in the community interest. And the specific goal and the reason they were looking at is they said, is there a way to meet all of those criteria while being absolutely religiously abhorrent to the right-wing evangelicals that this is built to satisfy? And they said, we think we can do it with a group called the Satanic Temple. So that idea was kicked around. And their first real thing was in 2013. Then Governor of Florida, Rick Scott, who may be a lizard in disguise, he worked with religious groups in the legislature to put together a bill that would allow for 2 minutes of quiet meditation or prayer in which students could read inspirational messages. It doesn't sound so bad. But the way the bill was written was specifically to get around the separation of church and state. It was written in such a way that this was kind of a mandated period where all the students were there and they had to listen to other students, but the teachers were not allowed to participate in the framing of the messages. So it was giving this kind of carte blanche to the Christian club, the Christian youth, the Christian groups in the school to seize 2 minutes of the day and take it over for religious purposes. So that's not a bad thing to have prayer in school. It's not a bad thing to have discussions in school. It is a bad thing to have government-mandated prayer in school. And the reason that's bad is because we have different religions. It's possible to pray in school right now. It's just not an allocated and designated activity. You can pray before a test. If you're a Muslim, you can go pray at lunchtime. Or whenever you need to based on your schedule, but usually it's at lunch. If you're Jewish, you can pray. Like you can fast while you're at school. You can observe your religion. You can wear your coverings. There are ways to observe your religion in school that are not government mandated. But as soon as the government steps in and says, here's how we're going to do it, that's problematic. It's often compared to Sharia law in Islam, because once you have these schools that are only letting boys in because the girls aren't supposed to learn the stuff, and then if girls do get in, they have to wear the religiously prescribed garments. That's the pathway this leads to. And we have to be allowing for all the different religions to participate in the public school system. So, Rick Scott, governor of Florida in 2013, he has this bill. And as soon as they put that bill out, Satanic Temple runs right up to it and says, hey, cool. We're super excited to hail Satan in school as an inspirational message. And they had signs out front. They were definitely trolling them and saying, hey, look at this. Look at what we're going to do with your inspirational message, 2 minutes. And that should have really given them pause to reflect and go, wait, is this pushing certain religions over other certain religions? And there's an argument to be made that it's just inspirational messages. But if you look at the way the law was crafted, it was done hand in hand with the religious organizations. We'll get to more later on where it's more overt that it's the church trying to come into schools. But for this one, the 2 minutes came in. The Satanic Temple is now firmly known from the coverage on this and going, hey, this is something that is really a concern. So, first troll. Their point is now made. So let's dive in a little bit into what they are, because now we know what they're doing and why they're doing it. They are a group who have 7 tenets. Here they are. I found the tenets. And tell me which of these sounds unchristian. So their fundamental tenets are 7. Instead of the 10 commandments, they got tenets. One should strive to act with compassion and empathy toward all creatures in accordance with reason. The struggle for justice is an ongoing and necessary pursuit that should prevail over laws and institutions. One's body is inviolable, subject to one's own will alone. 4th, the freedom of others should be respected, including the freedom to offend. To willfully and unjustly encroach upon the freedom of another is to forego one's own. 5, belief should conform to one's best scientific understanding of the world. One should take care never to distort scientific facts to fit one's belief. 6, people are fallible. If one makes a mistake, one should do one's best to rectify it and resolve any harm that might have been caused. And 7, every tenet is a guiding principle designed to inspire nobility in action and thought. The spirit of compassion, wisdom, and justice should always prevail over the written and spoken word. So those 7, I'm trying to find the harm or anger or despair in them. And these sound more Christ-like than the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments start off with the first 4 being no other gods, no graven images. It's all, the first 4 are just God going, I'm me. I'm the best. And they're kind of whiny. And I think what the New Testament is all about is trying to reconcile those with changes in culture. And I think this is doing that too. So we have these 7 tenets. They have a website, they have group meetings, and it's really interesting because they have a lot of people that go there, but a lot of the people that go and hang out and are social there use false names because of the number of death threats. They're in Boston. They've gotten together enough money and enough influence to have a place in Boston. And it's really cool. It's an old Victorian that they've dressed up to look like you would think, oh, the Satanic Temple. But it's super chill, and they kind of hang out and are with their friends. So maybe they play Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know. But what I do know is that the 2 founders are a guy named Lucien Greaves and a guy named Malcolm Jari. Those are pseudonyms. They don't want to get doxxed. They're out there, they talk. But they're not out there sacrificing goats in the full moon, making witches happen and stuff. But surprisingly, once they set up their headquarters in Boston, they became quite friendly with the fire department and the police department because they kept getting bomb threats. Somebody set their porch on fire and the police helped out. I would like to point out that this is the badge of the Boston police, and I think it's an excellent point to make that when they're wearing that badge, they are not going, we support witches and we are a part of Wiccan culture because we're cops. That wouldn't make sense anyway. They're taking a piece of cultural iconography that's involved in Boston's past and repurposing it for a new cultural space. Sounds pretty similar to what somebody else is doing in this story, doesn't it? So eventually we stop burning witches, and in the same way we can eventually stop being mean to each other and setting people on fire for having differences in opinion. So the Satanic Temple is there, and they are cranking along, doing their work, but when they're doing their work, they're trying to highlight the difference between morality and legality. And this is something that you see in some of the bills that have been proposed lately, where they're really loose, because they're like, well, everybody knows what I mean by it, but by that they mean other evangelical right-wing Christians know what I mean by it. And so when you're putting together laws, the jurisprudence and structure is very important to be fair, equitable, and towards a sustainable civil goal. When you're talking about morality and ethics, ethics is this study of how we live. And an ethic or amorality is an empty set. It's this thing that you can fill up with a whole bunch of different things, and it can change. In the Old Testament, it's fully moral to own other people. There should never be a time in which, in my opinion, it is moral to own other people. And we've structured laws so that it is illegal to own other people. But there's that split, right? So if somebody is a fundamental follower of the Old Testament Leviticus space and says you can't eat shrimp, you can't have clothing with mixed fibers, this is why this is my Satan jacket, because it's mixed fibers. Can't have mixed fibers. All of the stuff in Leviticus that's just kind of bizarre. No swine, you gotta eat fish on fish on Fridays. All of those things in there, you can do, I don't care, but you can't make them laws. You cannot prescribe the behavior of other individuals based on your morality. We have to come together and find the parts that cohere and develop on the back of that. Let's go to the next big milestone. This is fun. So they applied to the IRS to become a religious organization, exempt from taxation, same as the taxes are, same as this guy's jet is, same as this is a parsonage that doesn't pay taxes. The Satanic Temple applied and said, we want an IRS exemption. And under the Trump administration, the IRS granted them tax-exempt status. They have now pushed the definition of what a religion is and also what a church is. Because again, there's that difference between legality and morality. They're playing in the law to point out the difficulties with enshrining certain moralities, certain benefits. They're trying to call that out. Recently, and this is one you might have heard of. So now they're there, right? They have religious exemption. They're an active religious organization. They have a tax exempt status. They can get community funds, and they're open to be allowed to be in public spaces as a religious organization. So the Satanic Temple watches laws and goes, these laws might mess with people. In Iowa, they have this thing where in the Capitol, you can have a religious display for the holidays, and any religion can apply. Notably, it's pretty much the nativity or a Christmas tree every single year. Occasionally you'll get another adherent push in something from a different religion. Maybe you'll have a Jewish display for Hanukkah, but it's a little offset from Christmas. So you have different things that are in there. I don't know if they ever had a Festivus poll, but last year, 2023, the Satanic Temple applied and said, we'd like a turn. So in the Capitol in Iowa, you go one direction and you see the nativity with baby Jesus. You go the other direction and they had a the head of Bahamut. They had a statue or a shrine to Bahamut, just to call out, hey, having religion in public spaces can make some people uncomfortable. If you're of a religion that has been persecuted by Christianity or is having a direct conflict with Christianity, the nativity might not be a hopeful thing to see when you walk into the Capitol. And in the same way, the Ten Commandments being put in courthouses has the same kind of difficulty. If you're saying these are more important than the Bill of Rights or the Constitution and deserve to be on the wall, that can be problematic. So they're highlighting this and they go, look, nativity, Bahamut, how uncomfortable you are, how uncomfortable other people are. I probably should have done the Bahamut on this side, but my gestures went that way. But their point was made to the point that people were very uncomfortable and started protesting. To her credit, the governor of Iowa, Kim Reynolds, said the following as people were saying, why is there a Bahamut in there? We don't like it. Kim Reynolds said, like many Iowans, I find the Satanic Temple's display in the Capitol absolutely objectionable. In a free society, the best response to objectionable speech is more speech. And I encourage all those of faith to join me today in praying over the Capitol and recognizing the nativity scene that will be on display, the true reason for the season. She made their point by accepting it and saying, okay, the public sphere, government buildings are rooms for debate and discussion and concern to develop our legal forms and our next wave of jurisprudence. In that conversation, we can have both, and when it bothers us, let's talk about it and figure out if this is something we need to change in the law. There's one more step though, and that one more step should be, if I'm made this uncomfortable by that, is anybody else made uncomfortable by the nativity? Now I know it's kind of harmless, it's a baby in a manger, but it's symbolism, and symbolism is super important. It's how we structure a lot of things. It's how we have truth, justice, these symbols of American power. They have effect. So let's talk about what happens to Bahamut's little space next. A guy named Michael Cassidy, screw you, Michael Cassidy, a former Navy pilot and a self-described Christian conservative who loves our nation, that's his quote, and who ran for the Mississippi's House of Representatives as a Republican, beheaded Bahamut and threw that head in the garbage. What would you do? How would you react? Let's try and give you space for that, right? So it's true that the Satanic Temple has no true, oh my gosh, Bahamut's so important to us. They're using it as a symbol. They're playing these games. They're basically doing a giant epic troll in order to push change. So I don't think that they were as hurt in their soul as a Christian would be if somebody stole baby Jesus from a nativity or put Mary's head in the trash can. But start to see how that kind of a public attack on somebody else's representation in a government building highlights the inequity of the law and highlights how marginalized communities or fringes may not have the same access to put together something like a nativity or a Hanukkah display. So we have to start trying to figure out how that space works for him, right? So Michael Cassidy is now facing hate crime charges. That's fun. It's a felony, Michael. Enjoy. He's also raised a bunch of money on GoFundMe for his legal defense because that also happens, and Americans do that for healthcare and legal aid. GoFundMe. Solving problems since whenever they started. So that's the latest kind of round that's kind of resolved. Highlighting that split, right? So Bahamut's not a sympathetic figure. I get that. They literally go, look, it's a goat's head who is administering to children. And they're taking the classic pagan symbol of Bahamut and putting him in a statue with children and highlighting it. They've made coloring books for after-school clubs. So every time a school will be like, we need a Christian after-school club. They go, cool, we need an after-school Satan club. And here's coloring books and materials And it's hilarious because the stuff in the After School Satan Club is very much about accepting, fostering fairness, equity, the 7 tenets we talked about. So we'll leave that one alone. Coming back around to ethics, though, when we're talking about morality, we're talking about judgment of behavior and character from somebody to somebody based on a personal code. When we're talking about legality, we're talking about civil fines, we're talking about tort law, we're talking about prison, we're talking about how freedom and your liberty works and interacts with the state and those around you. That's why it's so important to separate morality from legality. Legality is saying you have violated this structure of our society that we've put together, encoded, and asked everybody to behave with. From jaywalking to murder, these are mostly well thought out and rational spaces where we go, we want people to be safe. You should not be in fear of your life. You should also not run across the street illegally. You will get hurt. We want to minimize that. We saw this with drinking and driving in the 80s. When it first came up, everybody was, well, not everybody. Some people were mad about it. But we saw a decrease in deaths. And the big reason for that is that I don't care if you get drunk and kill yourself. I care if you get drunk and kill other people, which is what was happening. Same thing with helmets, seatbelts, all these safety things we do in cars. We're not doing them for moral reasons. We're doing them for legal reasons. So when you start to get these things where morality kind of bumps into legality, you start framing things, I don't always trust the common citizen to make that choice. I like letting our elected representatives have these arguments. I like letting judges have these arguments so we can come out the other side and know how and why they thought about it. I do not like when it comes out that they say, God made me do it, God wants me to do it, this is how I see it, because I don't know their God. I don't know their structure of belief. Are they talking about the Judeo-Christian God? Are they talking about the Old Testament God only, who's pretty vengeful and killed a lot of babies? Are they talking about New Testament, Jesus, who's going to flip over tables and die for sins? Are they talking about Allah? Are they talking about animist deities that live in all the things? Are they talking about transcendental enlightenment? What are they talking about? And why is that relevant to our legal code? I don't think it is. So that's the structure that we're talking about. We're going to go to the last story and then do a closer. This is right now in Florida, this is happening. They are having the discussion in Florida to allow chaplains into schools. They're like, you got nurses, you got counselors, let's put chaplains in. And when they put it together, they just go, chaplains. And when they were asked about the bill and said, well, if you're going to be a nurse, here's all the education you have to have, here's what you have to get through. You have to have your background checks, all this stuff. You have to have done things to get there. Same with a counselor. You have to be credentialed. You have to get through all this stuff. Same with teachers. So when they say chaplains, define a chaplain. And the problem is they bump into it and they can't quite because they know what they mean, but they don't want you to know. So they put together this bill with a real organization, the National School Chaplain Association. And they're working on it not just in Florida, but other states. National School Chaplain Association is a subsidiary of Mission Generation Incorporated, which describes itself as Christian relief and development organization involved in church planning, leadership to give students, teachers, and parents the tools they need to make quality life decisions based on a personal relationship with Jesus and the leading of the Holy Spirit. Do you think a Jewish kid needs a personal relationship with Jesus? Do you think an animist, somebody who follows a Shinto religion, needs a personal relationship with Jesus? Do you think that Buddhists need a personal relationship with Jesus? I know what the evangelical answer is. I'm putting this out there as a thought experiment. Think about it. If you're Jewish and having problems in school and they say, go see the chaplain, is that helpful? So they're chasing this, and they're specifically saying this is going to help with children's mental health needs. Did they ever consider taking that money and funding more counselors, treatment, alternatives, training, paying teachers more? If you have a ratio of 20 kids to one teacher, they're more likely to have time with them, they're more likely to spot problems than when you're at a ratio of 40 to 1. These things, the structure of the schools, can be problematic. So the Satanic Temple jumps in and says, we are going to actively recruit and apply for the program so we can put satanic chaplains in the school. By the way, the wind here is currently blowing at about 20, 25 and gusting at 30 to 40. So every once in a while, if you hear anything, that's what it was. It was not the devil, it was the wind. So yeah, the Satanic Temple is offering to put satanic chaplains in school. The bill's sponsor is aware of the constitutional issues, and as she talks about defining this stuff, says, as we get in the middle of defining what is religion and what is not, and whether or not someone can be available and be on a list, we start to run into constitutional problems. She is correct. Our Constitution does not mention God. Our Constitution does not have a religious test to take office. That little bit at the end, so help me God, that a lot of presidents add on when they swear in, they added that. It's not required. They specifically put in the verbiage that they have to take an affirmation or an oath. They don't have to swear on a Bible. They don't always do. They can swear on a Torah. They can swear on the Quran. They can swear on a science book if they want. I think somebody did The Origin of Species. If not, that would be very entertaining. Somebody should do that when you get into office. So that's the call, right? Pull this stuff apart. Let religion be religion and have its conversations. Because those are these like Venn diagrams of different groups that all overlap in some ways. But at the end of the day, we're all Americans. And we should have the freedom to decide what our religion is without being told that we have to wear our hair a certain way, take the Sabbath off. So the bill is going through the House and the Senate in Florida right now. If it passes, it's extremely likely that DeSantis will sign it into law. And if he does, there will be immediate legal challenges that are very likely to, I don't know. I don't know if I trust the courts a lot right now. But the Satanic Temple is there trying to push a reevaluation of whether or not the bill is necessary through the offering of satanic chaplains, which I think would be hilarious if they end up being more helpful than the normal chaplains. That would be fascinating. We should do a study on that. So in closing, and in looking at how this legal moral split is there, the Satanic Temple is a group that I think is actually working in the best interest of the nation, while a lot of these religious people on the evangelical right are working for a Christian nation, which is terrifying and not what we are. So, the Satanic Temple, I am rooting for you. I am supporting you. And I don't know what's going to happen next, but let's write our legislatures. Let's pay attention to these bills and try and make sure they don't happen. And who knows, it may not be the Satanic Temple. It may be the Pastafarians, who are adherents of the flying spaghetti monster. If that happens, we will be here wearing our colander to report on it. For Weekly Dad News, I love you, Mom. I hope it didn't bother you too much. Good night. Oh, there's...